Have you ever had one of those nights that feel like they stretch on forever? The kind where you're lying awake, staring at the cracks on the ceiling, tracing them like the map of your mistakes. I still remember mine as if it happened yesterday. But that night, the color didn't matter. The walls felt like they were closing in on me. I was 29, living in a tiny studio apartment. ID painted a warm shade of green in an attempt to feel safe. Inside, old letters, Polaroid, photos, scraps of torn movie tickets. I hadn't bothered to turn on the lights. Just the street lamp outside, casting shadows through the half-open blinds. I was sitting cross-legged on the floor, back pressed against the bed. On the floor in front of me was a shoebox I hadn't opened in years. Hours earlier, I'd ended my relationship with Daniel. It wasn't that Daniel was terrible. We both were. I saw in him the same patterns I saw in Michael before him, and Sam before Michael. Or maybe he ended it with me. It didn't matter. The words were said. The tears were shed. When I stumbled onto Carl Jung's work. Not in some fancy psychology textbook, but in an old blog post written by a stranger at 3 a.m., just like me. And once again, I was alone. But underneath, the story was always the same. I'd get close, feel exposed, start to panic. I remembered the night my mother packed her bags, telling me, through clenched teeth, to be strong for your sister. My anger, my sadness, my fear of being abandoned. They'd never gone away. They'd just grown claws in the dark corners of my mind. I didn't know what strong meant, except that it had something to do with not crying and pretending nothing hurt. He'd pull away, I'd push harder, the fighting would begin, and then the parts we exile, because we think they'll make us unlovable, monstrous. But Jung's work didn't say the shadow was evil. It said it was repressed life force. Parts of our wholeness we'd traded for acceptance, for survival, for love. I wrote it on a sticky note and pressed it onto the mirror. I will not abandon myself again. Silence. I still felt the old patterns pull at me like quicksand. But that moment was my line in the sand. The beginning of my journey back home to myself. At first, the words came out angry. He never listened. He never cared. He didn't fight for me. But the deeper I went, the more I felt this icy wave of shame wash over me. Because the truth wasn't that I was just unlucky in love. I just wrote page after page. Stories I'd never dared tell anyone. Memories that made my skin crawl. Secrets that tasted like metal on my tongue. The truth was that I was addicted to chaos. To the push and pull. To the rush of the fight. To the agony of the aftermath that felt like a cruel reminder that I was alive. I looked like a ghost. Eyes swollen, hair wild, mascara smudged. But underneath the exhaustion, I saw something I hadn't seen in years. Curiosity. A spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't broken beyond repair. Maybe I was just fragmented. Except this time, the silence wasn't just an absence of him. It was an echo chamber, amplifying every harsh word I'd ever hurled at myself. I flipped through the photos in that box, my fingertips brushing over frozen smiles, fake promises, memories that once felt like forever but now tasted like regret. They'd all come wrapped in different packages. Different eyes, different laughs. Over and over again. That night, something inside me cracked. I asked myself a question I'd always been too proud or too afraid to ask. Why do I keep choosing the same kind of love when it always ends the same? I grabbed my old journal, the one with dog-eared pages and coffee stains, and started writing. I started Googling phrases like, why do I self-sabotage relationships? And why do I feel drawn to people who hurt me? It said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. The words glowed on the screen like a neon sign in the dark. Could it be that my endless cycle of heartbreak wasn't bad luck, but my unconscious mind playing out a pattern I refused to see? I remembered my parents fighting behind the closed bedroom door, my father's rage simmering like a kettle about to whistle. That night, I realized something painful. I had buried parts of myself to survive. I was dragging them into every relationship, like ghosts, rattling chains only I could hear. I read more about Jung's concept of the shadow, the hidden parts of us that we ashamed of or terrified to acknowledge. I didn't sleep that night. Around 5 a.m., I stumbled into the bathroom and caught my reflection in the mirror. And maybe if I could turn toward those hidden parts instead of running, I could stitch myself back together. So I made a promise to myself. It didn't fix everything overnight. I still messed up. And that's what I want for you to, because if you're here, watching this, chances are you feel it too. That whisper that says, there's more to you than the story you've been repeating. So stay with me, because in the next parts, I'll share the 5 hidden signs your shadow might be controlling your life, and what you can do to finally break free. When I started this journey, I thought shadow work was about digging up all the bad parts of myself and trying to fix them like a broken toy. But what I learned, sitting on that bathroom floor night after night, was that the shadow isn't something you fix. It's something you befriend. The first sign I really saw, was how easily I was triggered by other people. I used to believe that my anger or irritation said something about them. She was confident, bold, always pitching her ideas in meetings without a tremor of doubt in her voice. The worst part? People listened. They actually gave her space to shine, and something about that burned me from the inside out. She's so arrogant, I'd snap to myself in the break room at work. Or, he's so selfish, why does he always talk about himself? Her willingness to take up space in rooms where I shrank into the walls. But in the privacy of my journal, I finally wrote down the question I'd been too proud to ask. What does Lila represent that I don't allow myself to be? A rude driver, an old friend who always bragged about his money, a neighbor who seemed to have it all. But when you really face it, it feels like staring down the barrel of your own betrayal. It was like walking through a house of mirrors, each reflection pointing back to something inside me I'd abandoned. I'd start projects, a podcast, a book draft, a plan to launch my own workshop. But somewhere along the way, the excitement would sour into dread. I'd make excuses. I'd lose files. I'd ghost people waiting for my work. But if I was honest, there was always a tiny voice in the back of my mind whispering. The closer I got to someone who actually cared for me, really saw me, the faster I'd find a way to ruin it. I'd pick fights over small things, withdraw affection, create problems that didn't exist. And when the morning came, I called the organizer and told her I was sick. I didn't show up. Why does this bother you so much? As a kid, anytime I spoke up with my wild ideas, I was told I was too much. I asked myself the question that would become my healing mantra. Who benefits from me staying small? Don't make a scene. Keep your head down. You can learn to talk to that part of you that is scared to step into the light. I internalized the message that success would make me a target. Better to stay small, unnoticed. I tell it, I know you're trying to protect me, but I don't need you to run the show anymore. And the fact that you're here, listening, means you're already brave enough to face it. It doesn't silence the fear, but it makes space for courage to exist alongside it. I remember one night after work, I'd come home raging about my coworker, Layla, safe inside the story we've told ourselves for years. That we're not worthy. That we'll never be enough. That if we shine too bright, someone will snuff us out. It was everything I'd dreamed of. A chance to read my words to an audience. To be recognized for something I'd always done in the shadows. The night before my talk, I sat in my hotel room rehearsing my piece in the mirror, and suddenly, I felt like I was suffocating. My friendships and my very identity were all shaped by wounds I thought I'd left behind. I'd call her fake behind her back. I'd roll my eyes at her suggestions. They'll see right through you. You're not good enough. You're a fraud. It felt like touching a live wire, because under the annoyance, I saw the truth. I envied her freedom, her unapologetic presence. I could hear Jung's words echoing. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. But it took years to see it for what it really was. My shadow trying to protect me from the unbearable fear of being exposed. Of failing in public, or worse, of succeeding and then having to live up to it. My shadow was showing me the parts of me I'd locked away my own voice, my right to be seen and heard. I started paying attention to every time someone triggered me. If you notice that you overreact to someone's behavior, that you can't let it go, look deeper. Ask, what does this say about what I believe I am not allowed to be? Often, our biggest irritations are neon signs pointing straight to our wounds. SIGN 2. You sabotage your own success. The second sign was harder to admit. Self-sabotage is one of those words we toss around lightly. I used to think I was just bad with commitment. It wasn't just in my career. I saw it in love too. One memory still stings. A few years ago, I landed an opportunity to present my writing at a conference. The same old voices hissed in my mind. Who do you think you are? I didn't sleep that night. That lie burned me for months. Shadow work showed me that self-sabotage isn't about being lazy or undisciplined. It's an unconscious attempt to stay safe. When I looked back, I realized where this came from. The shift one night, after another project fell apart. I sat in my car in a dark parking lot, fists clenched on the steering wheel. No one, not my future self, Not the people who might need my words. Not the world that hungers for authenticity. When you see your self-sabotage as a message from your shadow, you can work with it. Now, when I feel that old fear rising, I write a letter to my shadow. Your reflection. Maybe you see yourself in these stories. Maybe you've felt the sting of your own triggers, or the heartbreak of dreams abandoned halfway. If so, you're not broken. You're human. You have a shadow, just like I do. In the next part I'll show you 2 more hidden signs your shadow might be holding the steering wheel. And I'll share the moment I realize my love life. Stay with me. The real healing is just beginning. It took me longer to see the next 2 signs. Maybe because they were the ones that hurt the most. Triggers and self-sabotage were painful, but they still felt like things I did alone, in private. But sign 3 and sign 4 were like raw wounds that showed up in every room I entered. But looking back, I see the same story written in different handwriting on the pages of my life. They made me feel small, ashamed, unworthy. And yet, I clung to them for dear life. He disappeared for days when he needed space, and I'd twist myself into knots trying to pull him back. If I'm honest, it felt like home. The push and pull, the ache of being almost loved, but never quite enough. It was a feeling I'd known since childhood. Sign 3. You repeat the same relationships. I realized that my shadow had made me believe that love was supposed to feel like abandonment. The child who learned to trade authenticity for acceptance. To hold back tears so nobody would think she was too much. To be the caretaker so no one would ever leave. Because I wanted pain, but because my unconscious mind craved what it knew. Familiar pain is safer than unfamiliar love. You were just playing out a script that was written long before you knew you had a choice to edit it. That chaos was passion. That if I just worked harder, loved more, gave more, they'd finally stay. She'd show up at my door at 3 a.m., crying about how no one understood her but me. Anger was dangerous. Tears were weakness. Wanting things, wanting more was selfish, greedy. So I learned to swallow my rage. To choke back my desires. To hide the parts of me that felt wild, hungry, alive. In each one, I forgave them for what they couldn't give me. But more importantly, I forgave myself for staying when I knew I deserved more. I was ashamed of wanting more because I thought wanting meant I wasn't grateful enough. They show up in your sarcasm, your passive aggression, your sudden outbursts when you can't hold it anymore. I remember one evening, sitting cross-legged on my bedroom floor, staring at an old family photo. They stop controlling you from the shadows. The energy you waste fighting them comes back to you. And you begin to feel whole, not just good. When I felt rage, I didn't bottle it up. I wrote about it, screamed into a pillow, took long walks where I could stomp my feet into the earth. You become honest. And honesty is the birthplace of freedom. When I felt desire, I let myself say it out loud, even if my voice trembled. Without running from who you really are, I traced my younger face with my finger. The shy eyes, the forced smile. But what we own can't own us. I whispered to that child. It's okay to want. It's okay to feel. Nothing in you is wrong. She opened it, her eyes like knives, and said, "Good kids don't behave like that." It was the version of me that pretended I was okay, that I didn't need help, that I was always nice and agreeable. But under the mask was my truth. I was angry. I was hurt. I was hungry for life to feel bigger. I'd dream of writing books, traveling the world, standing on stages to speak truth to people who needed to hear it. But every time I tried to take a step toward those dreams, my shadow whispered, "Who do you think you are? You're not special. You're just greedy. Be grateful for what you have." I sat with the parts of me that still longed for them. The memories that replayed like old movies at 2 a.m. I told those parts, "You're safe now. We don't have to go back." I told my therapist, "Why do I always attract people who don't choose me back? What's wrong with me? You think your wounds are your home?" I felt chosen, special. And then she'd vanish into the night again, leaving me holding all her ghosts and none of her truth. If you'd asked me 5 years ago whether I had a type, I would have laughed. I fall for different people every time. There was Michael, my first real love. He made me feel seen, like I mattered more than anything else. Until he didn't. Then there was Sarah, who taught me that love could be passionate and chaotic all at once. There were others, but the pattern was always the same. I fell for people who were emotionally unavailable. People who mirrored the distance and unpredictability I grew up with. I remember one therapy session that cracked me open like an egg. She looked at me so gently and said, "It's not that you attract them. It's that you feel magnetically drawn to what feels familiar." Those words stuck with me for days. But the real wound wasn't about them. It was about the abandoned parts of me. When I started shadow work, I had to face the ugliest truth. I was the one repeating the pattern. Not so I began a ritual. I wrote letters to my old lovers. Letters I'd never send. If you find yourself in the same cycle, different faces, same heartbreak, please know this: you're not broken. You're not cursed. SIGN 4. You feel deep shame about emotions or desires. If repeating toxic love was my wound, shame was the poison I poured into it every day without knowing. I grew up in a home where we didn't talk about big feelings. I remember once, when I was about 10, I got so angry at my mother that I slammed my bedroom door so hard it cracked. In that moment, I buried my anger. But the thing about buried feelings is, they don't die. They grow roots. As I got older, that shame twisted itself around my desires too. So I made myself small. I told myself I was humble. But really, I was terrified. Shadow work forced me to pull back the veil on that lie. I began doing something radical. Giving my emotions a seat at the table. Do you know what happens when you stop shaming your feelings? My turning point, one of the most powerful moments in my shadow work, was the day I gave my shame a name. I called it the mask. When you let your mask slip, when you look your shadow in the eye, you don't become bad. If any of this feels familiar, you're not alone. Shame is the glue that keeps our shadows stuck. In the final part, I'll share the fifth sign you ready for shadow work. And I'll show you simple but powerful ways to begin this work. Now stay with me. The deepest healing is almost here. When you've spent years circling the same patterns, the same heartbreaks, the same failures, there comes a night, or maybe a morning, or a moment in the middle of an ordinary day, when you realize you re-stuck. You might not have the words for it at first. You just feel it in your bones. No matter how many vision boards you make, how many self-help books you read, how many positive vibes only affirmations you tape to your mirror, something always drags you back into the mud. That's sign 5. The hardest to see, but the most liberating once you do. You feel stuck, no matter how much you grow. If I could just read enough, meditate enough, keep my gratitude journal perfectly, I'd finally fix myself. SIGN 5. You feel stuck, in spite of all the work. I used to think personal growth was about collecting tools. For years, I was addicted to the next big thing. A new coach, a new trend that promised I'd wake up one day and magically feel whole. Shadow work is the missing piece, because it doesn't ask you to fix your flaws. It asks you to sit in the dark with them, hold them, listen to what they want you to know. I've done everything right. Therapy, journaling, spiritual workshops. I knew all the quotes. I could explain my wounds with perfect language. I was doing everything except the one thing that terrified me most. Facing the parts of myself I swore I'd never look at. But I was still so angry. So was Ali triggered. Still picking fights with people I loved. Still freezing when opportunity showed up. But underneath it all, I felt like an actor in my own life. Playing the part of someone doing the work. While secretly terrified that my darkness was too deep to touch, I stopped trying to fix my anger and instead asked, "What do you want to show me?" It means you build a bridge between your conscious mind, the part that wants to be better, and the unconscious, which holds every secret you've tried to bury. The truth is, all those tools are beautiful, but they can become another mask if we're not honest. Just listening. I'd let her talk. Sometimes she didn't have words, or that burning in the throat that comes when you've swallowed your truth for too long. My anger turned into boundaries. My shame turned into compassion. My fear of being too much became fuel for speaking my truth. I was sitting in my living room with sunlight streaming through the curtains. A half-read self-help book lay open on my lap. The words blurred as my mind drifted. My wake-up call. Give it a shape, an age, a name if you want. Talk to it. Listen. Ask, what do you want me to know? My real breaking point didn't come during a crisis, but on an ordinary Sunday afternoon. Suddenly, I felt this wave of exhaustion hit me. Not physical tiredness. I put the book down, leaned my head back, and whispered out loud, "What more do you want from me?" Say, "Of course you're scared. Of course you're angry. You've carried this for years." In that silence, I heard the faintest answer, like a whisper from inside my ribs. Stop learning. Start listening. And that was it. That was the moment I understood. My stuckness wasn't a sign I hadn't done enough. The moment you meet your shadow, a trusted therapist, coach, or a community that understands, shadow work can hold space for parts of you that feel too big to hold alone. I started small. Every time I got triggered, I wrote it down. Not to analyze it to death, but to sit with it. Some days, you'll dig up weeds. I still get triggered. I still catch myself sabotaging things I care about. But now, instead of hiding, I turn toward my shadow and say, I see you, I hear you, and I love you anyway. Some days, you'll sit with your hands in the dirt, just feeling what's there. And that's enough. Instead of blaming the person or situation, ask, what is this pointing to inside me? Because we all need a gentle push to turn the light on in our own darkness. I'd close my eyes and picture my anger sitting next to me on the couch. A version of me, younger, raw, fists clenched. I learned to hold that version of me like I'd hold a child. No shaming, no rushing. Shadow work doesn't mean you become reckless or act on every dark impulse. The more I did this, the more I noticed something incredible. The parts of me I'd rejected began to soften. How you can begin if you've stayed with me this far? I know you're ready. Or at least curious. You don't need fancy rituals or an expensive retreat to start. You just need honesty and courage. Here are some steps that help me. 1. Keep a trigger journal. Every time you feel a surge of emotion, anger, jealousy, fear, pause. Write down the memory that comes up, even if it doesn't make sense yet. Over time, you'll see patterns. 2. Dialogue with your shadow. Find a quiet place. Close your eyes. Imagine the part of you that feels unlovable, too angry, too needy. This might feel awkward at first, but it's powerful. It breaks the cycle of abandonment inside you. 3. Practice radical self-compassion. When you catch yourself slipping into old patterns, don't shame yourself. Compassion dissolves shame. And shame is the glue that keeps your shadow in the dark. 4. Get support if you can. This work is deep. 5. Make it a ritual. Shadow work isn't a one-time thing. It's a lifelong practice. Like tending a secret garden inside you, the freedom that comes. So, here I am. Not healed, not perfect, but more whole than I ever dreamed I could be. That is freedom. Not becoming flawless, but becoming real. Fully human. Fully alive. Your next step, if this story stirred something in you, don't let it fade when you close this video. Write in the comments, I'm ready to meet my shadow. Let it be your promise to yourself that you will no longer abandon the parts of you that only want your love. Subscribe if you want more of these deep dives. Share this video with someone stuck in the same loops you've walked through. You are not too broken. You are not too much. You are not your wounds. You are the healer you've been waiting for. Make the unconscious conscious and watch your life transform. I'm right here with you. Thank you for walking this part of the journey with me.